Hi, this is Mrs. Baker, and I'm talking to you today about in-text citations and introducing quoted evidence. So in-text citations, it's actually harder to say the phrase in-text citations than it is to actually write an in-text citations. And the purpose of it is to quickly and easily show where you found information that you want to include in an open-ended response or in an essay. And you no longer need to write the words on page whatever this quote says. You don't need to use that anymore. We're going to use a more sophisticated method for citing the information by just using parentheses with the author's last name and the page number and parenthesis period. Super duper easy. So make sure your punctuation matters. You want to introduce the quote, you want to quote the quoted words, end the sentence, but don't put any punctuation marks right here. The only punctuation that might go there is if you're quoting a question, and then a question mark can go there, or if you're using an exclamation point, it can go there, but otherwise, no punctuation marks here. You do the citation, and then the period goes after the citation. You should also cite paraphrased information where you are summarizing or stating it in your own words. For example, like this one here, Lenny crushed Curly's hand. I'm saying this in my own words. I am not quoting it. And then I put the citation after the paraphrased information and then the period after the citation. Super duper easy. Now let's talk about how to introduce quoted evidence and using those in-text citations. So when you are doing a direct quote where you're not summarizing or paraphrasing, you always want to introduce the context of the quote in your own words. State who said it or who wrote it or what is happening. You have to tell us what's going on. We need to know that. Then copy the words from the text and put quotation marks around them. Cite the location of the quote with that in-text citation, the author's last name and the page number. And then explain the importance of the quote in 1 to 3 sentences after you've done that. So the first one I want to show you uses a real simple punctuation mark. It uses a colon. And colons are great. Real simple way of doing this. So in our first example, Steinbeck describes the setting to foreshadow the ending of the story. Colon. There it is. Just a lovely little dot dot. Quote, already the sun had left the valley to go climbing up to the slopes of the Gavilan Mountains. Dot dot dot. This dot 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 is called an ellipsis, and it lets us know that the sentence is continuing, that there is more, but we only quoted what we needed. So you could use ellipses multiple times when you're doing a quote to show, you want to provide a lot, but without writing all the things. And then you have the citation at the end with the period after the citation. Now then you could follow up with a couple of sentences that talk about the setting and how the setting in chapter 1 and chapter 6 are very similar, but with some distinct differences. And like the lack of light in chapter 6, this ominous feeling foreshadows the ending of the story. And you no longer need to write the words, this quote shows that, yada, 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 yada. Just start with the yada, yada, yadas. Don't even say this quote shows that anymore, okay? Here's the second example using a colon. And this time I'm quoting dialogue, but it's a full, complete sentence. When caught eavesdropping, Candy knows that he does not have the power to argue with George and Lenny, comma, so he tells them what they want to hear to avoid a confrontation. Colon. I could have ended the sentence there, but no, I'm going to continue the sentence using the colon and then having the quote right after. A guy on the ranch don't never listen or don't he ask no questions. End quote, parentheses, Steinbeck 34, and parentheses, period. And then the colon is just a way, really, of connecting two complete sentences, but putting them into one. Because you never, ever, ever, ever want to start a sentence with a quotation mark. Unless you're doing fiction writing. Unless you are writing a story and you're doing dialogue, well, yeah, of course, then you can start with a quotation mark. But if you're doing this style of writing, where it's explanatory, you are explaining things, you do not start with a quotation mark. Now, this last example here, this other way to do it is to use a comma or use a substitution. So our first example, George and Lenny have a dream to, quote, live off the fat of the land, end quote, and own their own farm. Now, this is what I would call a substitution. This quote here, I don't really necessarily need it, but I'm subbing it, I'm substituting it into my sentence, and it adds a little bit more sophistication to my writing. I could have just wrote the sentence, George and Lenny have a dream to own their own farm. But by putting in that quoted words, it adds a little bit more to the sentence, and then I finish it off with the citation. Even though this is a very short quote, it still counts as cited evidence, and you can still use it. Our last one is probably one you're more familiar with, where you introduce the speaker of the quote. Candy proudly talks about his dog, provide us with who he's talking to, saying to the ranch hands, comma, you wouldn't know to look at him now, but he was the best damn sheepdog I ever seen, end quote. Steinbeck 59, period. This one, again, I'm quoting dialogue, so I'm introducing who's talking, who are they talking to, and I could follow this up with some sentences explaining the symbolism of Candy's dog, or I could talk about ageism, how they judge people based on their age. Like Candy is judged, the guys may have forgotten the contributions he's made to the ranch because he's old now, and that he's fearful of getting fired or shot like his dog. Okay, so hopefully you better understand how to insert quotes into your own writing, and you can apply this to any open-ended response or essay in which you are providing cited evidence. If you have any questions, please ask.